Hey all, thanks for joining the Whiskey March today. As always, I'm Armand, and today we're going to talk about proof. So, in Europe in general and many parts of the world, everyone talks ABV, that's alcohol by volume. But what do they mean, or what does it mean when you see proof on a bottle? Coming from the US, we're quite familiar with proof, and we hear a lot of interesting stories about what it means and where it came from. But as I started to drink more whiskey while living in Europe, I learned about British proof. And as I started to dig into it, I thought it was pretty interesting. So I want to talk about the difference between proof around the world, what it means, how you calculate it, and some interesting stories I learned about proof while trying to learn a little bit about this stuff to share today. For instance, this is Wild Turkey 101. And 101 actually refers to its proof. It's a 101 proof alcohol, which means 50.5 ABV. So in the US, ABV is very straightforward. It's double or 2 times the amount of alcohol ABV which is in the bottle. So on the one side, we see here that this is 100 proof, and on the other side here, we see that it is 50.5 ABV. Now, this makes it very easy. In the US, just double it. But where did this come from? Well, it actually turns out that proof was what the British used in calculating and proving what the taxable rate for whiskey should be. Really interesting, actually. Before, they had overproof and underproof as the only 2 taxable brackets because they weren't able to properly count and figure out exactly how much ABV was in a bottle. Nowadays, if you have 50.1%, for instance, or 50.5%, you pay a different tax than if you have 50%. Of course, that 0.5% doesn't make a huge difference, but it is definitely in larger scale productions, it could add up. So, proofing, overproofing, and underproofing in the UK. How did they test this without any of the regular testing equipment that we have today? Gunpowder. Really simplified, they would take whatever whiskey you had, they would then pour it over, they had a very specific amount, and you'd pour it over a specific amount of gunpowder. If you lit the gunpowder and it went up in flames, so it actually ignited, you would be overproof and you would be taxed additionally for your whiskey. If the fluid did not catch on fire and did not light up, then you would be underproof and you would be taxed at a lower rate. So this went on for a while, and funny enough, the calculation for a British proof, which they don't use anymore, they've also now moved to ABV like the majority of Europe, was not 2 times the amount of volume, ABV, but 1.75. Yes, 1.75 times. Now, this means that the calculation is a little bit more complicated. By the way, they also set it like 7/4, which is 1.75. This means that if you have a 100 proof, in the US that would be 50% ABV. In the British old system, you would have 57.5. You would actually have 57.1%. See, the calculations just don't make sense. 2 times is just easier and better. 1.75, yeah, it works, it's complicated. But that was a very cool story, and I really liked the idea of how they used simple tools at their disposal, in this case gunpowder, to be able to test the ABV of alcohol, because we hear of some different techniques and strategies in the US and different stories around proof, what it means, and how it's been used and tested over time. The first way, which was my favorite way, it doesn't quite add up, and we'll explain why in a moment, but there used to be the proof method, which, just like in the UK, cowboys would take a bullet and they would mix the gunpowder with the whiskey and try to ignite it. The reason that this was a common, or at least folklore, and many say it was common, thing to do in the States or in the US, was that we had a lot of rectifiers and unofficial distilleries or people changing whiskey in order to sell it. And what this meant is sometimes they'd be adding water, different types of fruits, who knows what, but trying to make a whiskey flavored beverage that wasn't actually whiskey. And sometimes the ABV here would be much less. So by proofing it, adding gunpowder and lighting it, you could be assured that your alcohol was a high enough proof and you're actually getting the whiskey that you paid for, not some mix. Well, this sounds great and all, but yeah, you need about 57% in order to light up. So 100 proof, which makes you think that 100 proof is A-okay and it's perfect, would have not actually been correct. You would have had to have 57 proof. But who knows, maybe their measurements never really caught on or didn't catch on as fast as we think it did today. The second way to test was more found in the moonshining parts of the world. Now, of course, we went over moonshining in another video. If you have a chance or interested in learning about a little bit of moonshine, you can look at that. But in moonshining, we're making whiskey with limited resources. And what that means is when you want to test alcohol or moonshine, you don't necessarily have the tools at your disposal to, because they're quite expensive, quite frankly, for everyone to test and to be aware of how much ABV they have. So they had the shake test. The idea is you take the bottle, you shake it, and depending on how long it takes for the whole spirit to go clear again, you would be able to calculate roughly how much ABV is in the bottle. Now, some people are really good at this. And if you're one of those people, what do you think? How much, I was probably not strong enough. What do you think? How much ABV do I have in here? I'll tell you in the comments. But yeah, these are the two main, let's say, US traditional ways of checking out proof. It actually started with the Brits, however, they don't follow it anymore and they've come to ABV. But I've started to see more and more European-styled whiskey distilleries using proof, and the proof not quite adding up to ABV. And, or let's say proof not proving to be the same as it is in the US. And that's why US 2 times, old traditional European way 1.75. Now you know. Cheers to you all. Have a great day and enjoy that whiskey, no matter the proof. Bye all. 101.